everybody? We're cutting off the timer early this week, like we did a couple weeks ago whenever we talked about the news that Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer were gone from the Minnesota Vikings. One of those men has now been replaced as of this morning. Officially, I think last night was probably when they officially got everything ready. But help me with the name here, Jack. Kwesi.
Kwesi Adolfo Mensa is how I've heard that it's proper. And the weird thing on what you just said too, I did a show earlier today as well. We haven't seen like the official release from the Vikings yet. It's like it's reported officially and that it's out there that he is going to be the next GM. It just seems kind of odd that there wasn't like any
Maybe it's
team
like
communication today. Maybe they're just
Maybe it's like a symbol of unity. They're going to wait until Kwesi picks his head coach from the list of available candidates, and they're going to say, hey, this is the new Vikings leadership. We look forward to a long and prosperous many Super Bowls, blah, 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 business speak, all that. But we're here to kind of talk about what we think of the hire. Out of the two finalists, he was my favorite. I think it's really easy to be a GM when Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback, and I don't know that anybody saw this Patrick Mahomes being this Patrick Mahomes. I think they just took him because they liked what he could kind of do, and sure enough, he's probably the best quarterback in the league right now. So I really liked Kwesi as the head coach, as the GM candidate, just because I feel like it was tough in Cleveland. But again, and I said this during the Spielman Zimmer episode, we can't speculate too much about GMs. One, it's not like hiring a defensive coordinator where it's like if the defense is good, the DC's probably good. Go ahead and give him a head coaching job. We don't know how much he had to do in Cleveland. We don't know if he pounded the table saying, hey, this is our guy, this is my guy. We don't know. No one was in that room. So personally, just looking at Cleveland's roster, the way that they've accelerated, I mean, you've got Cleveland fans that were sobbing into their beers a couple years ago because they didn't win a game, now being upset that their team missed the playoffs after winning 8 or 9 games this season. So I think that there's the roster's definitely had a big turnaround, and I hope that Kwesi's a big part of that. You also look at San Francisco, who seems to always be in the mix for the NFC. I know they had a couple down years, but then they got Jimmy G, and it was like they're right back in it. He was there for a little bit as well. Not in as big of a role as he was in Cleveland, I believe. He was just kind of in like the analytics department. But that analytics world is something you're going to hear thrown around a lot now that he's the GM, because he does come from that Wall Street math. I've seen a lot of people saying like, oh, he's like, the geek. He's the geek. He's a dweeb. He crunches the numbers and picks players that way. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I'm rambling here a little bit. Jack, I'll let you give your first impressions here. Me personally, in just a few words, love the hire. Think he's going to do great things. Can't wait to see who the head coach is. What are your thoughts on Kwesi?
Yeah, I'm excited, and I think we'd be saying the same thing regardless who the GM was. If we're being completely honest, we'd be behind the decision regardless. But Kwesi was a name that we had mentioned in the show a couple weeks back, someone that we liked. He was Andrew Barry's right-hand man in Cleveland, and I mean, we did the show after the draft last year, and we spent, if I'm remembering correctly, maybe we didn't talk a ton about it, but we were both really impressed with what the Browns did in the draft last year, especially through the first 2 rounds with Greg Newsome and then JOK. Like, that's 2 needs where the Vikings are, quite frankly, the Vikings are going to be absolutely desperate for talent at both of those positions. And I loved how they tried to rebuild that defense up with 2 absolute playmakers. I didn't follow Cleveland sports as closely as you probably do living in that backyard. I don't know how they did this year, their rookie year, but that doesn't necessarily determine the future outlook of those two players. I loved them out of college, and it's cool seeing that there's 2 players that you and I were both fairly high on throughout the draft process last year, And whatever he does, whether that's analytical, I know he brings analytics and they talk about that because of his background, the economics degrees. But Ben Lieber had a good tweet about it today. That's not all it is. It's not baseball week where you can just go out and you can straight up moneyball this. And that's a term that people are throwing around. It's not going to be like that. Mark Wilf, during his press conference a couple weeks ago, and they did let Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman go, talked about the importance of building this camaraderie and having a group of people that are an in it together type mindset. We heard the reports about Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman not talking for the last few months. That can't happen. The Wilfs know that. And the frustrations that kind of, I'll say, leaked out, because it's not like Brian O'Neill and Eric Hendricks are sitting up here saying, you know what, that was the worst locker room I've ever been a part of. That's not the case. And honestly, if the Vikings were winning, that probably wouldn't have even gotten brought up to the extent that it did. But when you have two people that are very stoic, silent leaders on that team, and Eric Kendricks and Brian O'Neill, talking about the culture and how it was a fear-based culture, I think that speaks volumes for the state that the Minnesota Vikings were in. And I think the Kwesi hire is the polar opposite of what this state of the Vikings, for what they were in with Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman at the end of that era. So I said this today, and I'll say it again. I think the Wilfs are practicing what they're preaching. They went out and said, hey, they listened to their players. They said, we need a change. We need to get a better culture in this building. And I think they firmly believe that they're getting that with Kwesi.
Yeah, I think that, and I do want to spend the second portion of this. This shouldn't be a super long episode of Load the Box this week. We'll probably come back, I would say, unfortunately, in the next couple of days with a head coaching decision. And we'll probably fire it up a little earlier than next Wednesday night if a head coach is announced. But my question then becomes, if this is the move for the Vikings and they want this like camaraderie, they want this, I don't want to say youth infusion, but this youth infusion of like young out of the box thinking GM. You look at the head coaching candidates, a couple of them, kind of stood out, like as not being super young. But most of those head coaching candidates, though not the young offensive gurus that Vikings fans were clamoring for, they're all pretty young. I mean, my favorite guy's only been the DC for San Francisco for one season in D'Amico Ryans. And, he was just playing, like a decade ago. So it does feel like I'm seeing a lot of like maybe, Vic Fangio could come up to Minnesota. Maybe they'll pair him with a head coach who has experience. So he, it's kind of like, and it doesn't seem like that meshes to me. Another name that I want to throw out there that I want to get your thoughts on are Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. A lot of rumors about him coming up. I believe, don't quote me on this, Kwesi was in the building with Jim Harbaugh when he was still in San Francisco, and then there was a blow up, and then he went to Michigan and Kwesi went to Cleveland. But that's a name that's now being thrown out there as a potential ties to the Vikings head coaching job. Not to mention, there are people saying like, don't count out the Vikings for Jim Harbaugh. What are your thoughts on Jim Harbaugh as well as the coaching decision, whether it be offensive or defensive minded? I mean, do you think, not Vic Fangio in particular, that's just a name I've seen a lot of people throw around. Do you think an older coach would pair well with this new GM in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah?
If you bring in a Vic Fangio because you bring in a young offensive mind and you put Vic Fangio as the D coordinator of this team, no issues with that. But I don't think that's the direction this team's going to go. Personally, I would not hate the idea of. I think the Wilfs stated this pretty clearly that the GM is going to have a say. So I think they know right now, or they have a pretty good understanding of who the next head coach of this team is going to be. Why did I just space out? Jim Harbaugh. That's what we were talking about. I don't love the idea of Harbaugh for some reason. And we talked about this earlier today as well. I don't always love the idea of players coming from the college level, but he has a proven track record already in the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers, bringing them to a Super Bowl as the head coach. So he knows what it takes to win. I mean, he has gotten some criticism, rightfully so, at Michigan up until this year. And I'm sure you are all well aware of that, living in the great state of Ohio. I didn't know where that was going either. But
It's a
he up
wonderful
until
state. It's a
up
wonderful
until
state.
this point, he obviously, or this year, he didn't beat Ohio State, and that's the national championship for Michigan and Ohio State fans. It's not fully true, but it's a huge deal, bigger deal than any rivalry we know out here in Minnesota. But I think I'm honed in on some of the guys that have been in the NFL for the last few seasons. I like Ryan's. I know that's your guy. Raheem Morris is another guy for the Rams D coordinator. The good news is the Vikings and their fan base, they get to take a front row seat this weekend to watching these guys deck it out. I think his stock has risen a ton because we were talking about this a little bit before the show. It's risen a ton because the Vikings just saw firsthand what his defense can do to Aaron Rodgers in a playoff game at Lambeau Field. That shouldn't happen in theory, especially against the first ballot Hall of Famer and Aaron Rodgers. They just went in and won that game without Jimmy Garoppolo throwing a touchdown. I believe without the offense scoring a touchdown.
No, they didn't
I
score
could
a
be
touchdown
wrong.
on offense.
That is insane. That should not happen, especially with going up against a quarterback of the caliber of Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon. Like there's offensive talent all over the board in Green Bay, and they outcoach them. And
I don't want
I know.
to. I don't want to cut you off too much because I want you to keep on this because I think you're about to go into like Raheem Morris and some of your guys that you like for the position. But like in my opinion, they should have sent a stretch limousine and had it waiting outside Lambeau and just watched the game. And if in the third quarter it was a blowout and D'Amico Ryan's defense looked bad, okay, we'll drive away. We'll still interview him, whatever. After that, I mean, you got to be like, you got to send a guy in a trench coat to just be like, hey, D'Amico, get in. Like we're gonna drive across state lines. You're signing a contract tonight. Name your price. Like it seems so clear as day to me that he's the guy. But I know you're real big on the Rams defensive coordinator whose name is escaping me.
Raheem Morris.
Thank
And
you.
like I said with the GM, you and I are going to probably more than likely be behind whatever coach they hire, unless it's Sean Payton for some godforsaken reason. If my dad's watching, he might throw a comment in there. But Raheem Morris has a unique history in the NFL where it's not just on the defensive side of the ball. He's been a head coach already. The guy has a 10-7 season with Josh Freeman. And if you're a Vikings fan and you remember that Josh Freeman season, he is not a good quarterback. That's not a reason to hire someone as a head coach. But there's just other reports out there. You have guys like Jalen Ramsey, who's kind of putting his foot in the ground for him, saying he deserves another head coaching chance. I saw a report where he kind of, when he was working with Washington, they had D'Angelo Hall on the roster, kind of I don't know the right word I'm looking for, but like a diva-esque presence in that locker room that he was able to kind of hold together. And if you look at the Rams, I mean, they have no fear of bringing in talent. It doesn't matter what your background is. The whole situation with Odell Beckham Jr. in Cleveland, they brought him to LA and hey, look, the experiment is working just fine. It doesn't look like he was the issue. But another one that was interesting that we also talked a little bit about earlier, right before we hopped on, is Nathaniel Hackett is a name. I read something yesterday that said he was the front runner for the Denver job, and it was like tying together Denver and correlating Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams going to Denver too, which if that's the case, Denver, please hire Nathaniel Hackett. You can have Aaron Rodgers, you can have Devontae Adams, get him out of the division. We'll take 1A or we'll take 1B if you guys want to take 1A and make that happen. But I don't know where the connection comes from, and maybe that's something we could look up while we're talking, but I don't know where that connection stemmed from. It was something Paul Allen was talking during 9 to noon today, and all of a sudden he brought up this name mid-show. So I don't know if he got some sort of scoop. And now if you go on to NFL Network, there was a video that I saw right before we hopped into the show of Rappaport saying that Hackett is one of the top coaches that the Vikings are targeting, which is interesting because whenever there's steam like that, there's a little bit of truth behind it. And one other thing that I wanted to talk about with Kwesi that it excites me, he is a first-time GM, yes, but there is a chance that the Vikings bring in 2 of the candidates that they interviewed for that GM position, and he can have that as his number 2, essentially. A name that Will Ragetz, friend of the show, tweeted out 20, 30 minutes ago prior to the show. If you look up Catherine Raish on Wikipedia right now, it says 2022 to present that she's working for the Minnesota Vikings as an assistant general manager. I know Wikipedia is usually not legit. That's where I found out that, or that's where I used the age that I found for Kwesi that was 32 or
yeah.
33 years old. He is actually 40
He
years old. If you
graduated
did
from
not know
Princeton
that.
when he was like 12 years old.
But yeah, I don't know. The coach, it's going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of steam. It's going to pick up here now that it's, I say official, because I would guess at some point tomorrow it will become officially official. The Vikings will tweet something out, I would imagine. And like you said, maybe this isn't the case. Maybe they address the media together. But I would feel like there is a Kwesi Adolfo Mensa. God, it's going to take me a while to get used to saying that name for some reason. I don't know why. It's not a hard name to say. It just like for some reason it doesn't flow out of my mouth properly.
It doesn't.
But I would expect some sort of press conference in the next couple days. I would think it would be coming tomorrow. He's been in Minnesota for 2 days. Also, we're past this point. I wanted to talk about it anyways. I haven't talked about it really with anyone, but the video, I think it was Fox 9 in Minnesota that captured the video of him leaving yesterday, and the girl in the background saying, "I'll cancel your flight," yada, yada, yada. Like, that was awesome. I thought that was hilarious. But sounds like the dinner party, wherever they went, whether it was Manny's Steakhouse or whether it was at the hotel right next to the practice facility, it sounds like everything went well. And I'm excited to see the direction of this football team for the future, because for the first time in forever, like, I mean, we're talking, you and I were high school, middle schoolers the last time the Vikings made a switch at these positions. And it almost feels like a breath of fresh air, a breath of fresh air. And that's something that we haven't really felt over the last couple of years. And especially this year when it started to kind of it just felt like the team was worn out. It was kind of tiring talking about this team. And for the first time in a few months, I think you and I are both getting back to having some levels of optimism and looking ahead rather than kind of dwelling on the state of the Vikings currently.
Yeah, it definitely seems like, and maybe this is incorrect. To me, it seems like the Wilfs maybe won't gonna go in the direction that they've went, and that it looks like they're gonna go with head coaching and everything. But then those reports started leaking out about how toxic the relationship between Zimmer and Spielman were. They weren't talking to each other. Zimmer didn't address the team after he lost his job, even though he had a chance to. Like, I don't want to take turns crapping on Mike Zimmer. Spielman. They'll both, look, my dad says it all the time. I've kind of coined the foot. They gave us a lot of fun years. Okay. There were, big playoff wins, the miracle, the OT game a couple years ago against the Saints. Like, they've given us some fun seasons to watch. It just seems like after that leaked out, they said, okay, we are finding guys that love each other. Like, we are going to get a GM, and we're going to tell this GM, pick this head coach carefully. We have built you a small room in your office, and you guys are constructing bunk beds together, and you're going full Step Brothers. We got your night vision goggles and katanas and everything. You have to be best friends with this guy. Like, you guys have to talk about everything. If you wake up and you slept on your neck wrong, I want you to text him and say, "Man, buddy, my neck hurts. Will you give me a massage?" And the coach better say yes. Like, it seems like that's what they want. They want that level of working togetherness. And I think that's why they went with young Kwesi, who is he's young. This is his first chance, and I think they're going to tell him, pick this head coach wisely. We do want you guys to be joined at the hip. I'm not saying that if the head coach does get fired, Kwesi then immediately gets fired, but it's also being reported Kwesi's deal is a 4-year contract. I should hold that up like this instead of like this. It's a 4-year contract. That's not a super duper long-term deal, right? I mean, that's just kind of like, okay, you got one coach probably. You get one coach, pick your coach, and then if it doesn't work out, then we're going to replace you both, and we'll start this cycle that bad teams do, where it's new GMs, new head coach. We want to see success. I do hope the Wilfs are patient. If just because we're not winning Super Bowls after like 3 years, don't get itchy and pull the trigger on the guys. But Tom Day in the chat asking if they both get movie quality Chewbacca masks. They do, Tom. They both do. Only if they win us a Super Bowl. That's what they get. They get that.
They can have anything. Yeah, they will get anything they want in this state if they do that. They will be bowed down to if that happens.
But I think we've done enough. I've done enough.
I have one last thing that I want to talk about, because I know this is going to be, I mean, we can save some of it for down the road, but this is going to be a talking point. And if you don't want to hear the name Kirk Cousins, back out of the show right now, because it's going to be one of the biggest topics that you and I talk about, especially after the coach is hired, because we don't know what they're thinking right now. There were some weird reports that I don't know if they're legitimately verified about some Deshaun Watson's team. I don't buy into that. But when that report leaked, it was a video of a guy on Instagram that I saw that was verified. He mentioned that the Wilfs do not think that Kirk Cousins is the answer. And if that is the narrative being pushed from the top down, if that's the case, it's all in theory still, that's not confirmed. I don't think a new GM and head coach are going to come in here and disobey the owners that just gave them a job. One. For two, I don't think a GM, first-time GM, likely a first-time head coach, maybe not. They could bring in someone with some experience. I don't know if they're going to want to tie themselves to Kirk Cousins. This will be Kwesi's first chance at a GM role, which comes with, this is just the nature of the position, trying to find that franchise guy, trying to find Josh Allen, trying to find Patrick Mahomes. And there's a lot of people on Twitter saying, oh, it's not that easy to find Patrick Mahomes. I don't give a damn if it's that easy. That's not the point, if it's easy or not. The point is you have to make the effort to get there.
Right.
If we're stuck in neutral, if this franchise is stuck in neutral and not getting out of the mud, what are we going to do? We're going to sit here and watch another 3 years and then it's going to blow up in their face because the quarterback isn't elevating the team around him quite enough. I've said this and you've said this many times before. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. Kirk Cousins can get to a Super Bowl, could potentially win a Super Bowl if he is on the correct roster. Right now, the roster around Kirk Cousins, yeah, it's cute. The offense is still really good. Most of that's going to remain in place. If you look at that defense and the amount of one-year deals that are expiring this year, it's not pretty. There's a very, very good pass rusher, arguably the most important player on that defense that has a contract up in 2023. The future of his career is going to be a debatable subject as well. Right. Do you trade a guy like that? Do you extend a guy like that? But they need to not only find starting level talent for that defense if they want to have any chance at competing in 2022, but they have to find depth. They can't just go out and sign these one-year deals like Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman tried. And I'm not knocking that because Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer knew if this didn't work out, this was likely the outcome. They knew that going into the season, so they tried their best to get the best product on the field that they could. Now you have a chance to completely Kwesi has no ties to this roster. He can, and that's going to make a lot of people upset. If it's Adam Thielen, he doesn't probably really care that he was a Minnesota State graduate that was on a $500 scholarship and had to pay for his own tryout.
Yep.
He's not going to care about that. I'm not saying he's going to go out and just cut Adam Thielen. That's probably not likely, but there's going to be a lot of change. There's going to be a lot of turnover on this roster. And I think that has to start with the quarterback position. There's a lot of people out there that don't want to hear that because they're like, well, what's the answer? How do we replace Kirk Cousins? That's the fun in this. We don't know, but you have to try. There has to be an effort to find a guy, whether it's, we've talked about some of the quarterbacks and we'll get into that a little bit more in this upcoming draft class. It's not the greatest, but again, Patrick Mahomes was drafted with the 10th overall pick in 2017, 8 picks after Mitchell Trubisky. Trubisky was looked at as more of a clear-cut NFL-ready quarterback than Patrick Mahomes was. Look where they're at now. I guess Trubisky just lost to Mahomes on the bench for the Buffalo Bills. But, and same thing with Josh Allen. The first year in 2018 when he was a rookie, he had talent. When you see him run the football, and every Vikings fan, this is printed in your memory, the hurdle over Anthony Barr. It's like, hey, this guy is different. He's got the athleticism. Can he put the accuracy in it? Can they develop him properly? They did that, and because of that, I just watched probably the best division round football game of my lifetime outside of the Minneapolis Miracle, because nothing will ever top that for me. But it's not about replacing Kirk Cousins in 2022 necessarily. I know a lot of Vikings fans want a quick answer because Kirk Cousins has been good the last 4 years. But personally, and I'm speaking for both you and myself because I know you feel the same way, it's not about being good anymore. This organization is going to have higher standards. This fan base has been starving for a Super Bowl for so long. And Kirk Cousins is not going to bring a Super Bowl to the Vikings with this current roster.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest, not argument, but the biggest point, it goes back to a tweet I sent out from the show's account last night. And it was, look, Cousins is, I kind of want to pull the tweet up just because I can't because my phone's my camera, but whatever. It basically just went into this whole Cousins debate about how, there's been some Twitter beef going on between Vikings talking heads, and somebody's like, oh, all we have to do is just draft Patrick Mahomes and everything's solved, like it's that easy. And the guy's like, no, but you have to try to do. If the Chiefs said, hey, we just like made the playoffs with Alex Smith, we're pretty good, like, we make the playoffs, like almost every year, if not every other year, like it's rare that we don't make the playoffs. Let's just stick with Alex Smith. He's the safe option. Let's extend Alex Smith. They probably would have finished third in their division this year, if not last, with the way that Vegas, LA, and Denver all played. I know Denver had the Bridgewater injury, whatever. That's why I said they'd finish third instead of winning the division and now playing in their fourth straight AFC Championship game, looking to go to back-to-back-to-back Super Bowls, and in my opinion, probably win their second Super Bowl in a 3-year span. It's insane to me that Vikings fans would rather stick with Kirk Cousins, who has one playoff win, and he played well in that playoff game. I've stopped buying into this whole Cousins melts down in primetime thing, because I don't think it is that he melts down in primetime thing. I think he just occasionally melts down. It happens on Sundays at 1. It happens on Monday nights, Thursday night. It can happen at any time where he just has a bad game. And then, poo-poo, your season's just about done after he has a few of those. Not to mention, he's I don't know, like the mobility's not there. Like, I'm not going to sit here and knock Cousins for the rest of the show.
I know the words that what I say, it's the excitement factor.
Yes.
And
the Wilfs electricity that he doesn't have.
The Wilfs know that they need to put butts in seats at US Bank Stadium. And if they continue being mediocre, I'm going to say this, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was not the safe hire for the GM role. I think Poles was the safer option. He's more of a traditional guy. He's worked through the scouting departments for the Kansas City Chiefs. That's not what Adolfo-Mensah comes from. We talked about that. He was Wall Street, economics masters, and undergraduate. But my favorite quote that I've seen on him are how people explain him as a sponge. He just soaks up knowledge.
Yes.
And when I was reading something when he was spending time with San Francisco, he'd go and he'd sit with the scouting department and he would just ask questions. He said that in some of his press conferences. He asks way too many questions because he wants to know the why behind things. And I think that's the type of guy you want to take a chance at on the GM position. And if the Wilfs are willing to take that chance at the GM position, you can bet your ass they're willing to take that chance at the head coach position, and most importantly at the quarterback position. So yeah. I think there's going to be a shakeup coming.
I think, and this is just my opinion, I don't know if Cousins will be traded or if he will play this season. If he will not play a snap for the Minnesota Vikings in 2023. I think I confidently say that right now. I don't think you look at his track record in Washington, they didn't want him for some reason. He comes to Minnesota, makes one playoff in 4 years, wins a wild card game, and then flames out. And now it's like, well, what do you do with him? Are we gonna extend him through the rest of our contracts as a head coach and GM? Because I'm assuming the head coach is probably also getting a 4-year deal that's gonna line him perfectly up with Mensah. And if everything goes well, then okay, everybody gets extensions. If nothing goes well, then okay, maybe everybody's getting the axe if it goes really badly. But I just like. I think that they're going to take their shot in this draft. I really do. I think they're going to take a shot on a guy like Desmond Ridder. It wouldn't shock me to see the Ravens, did it with Lamar Jackson. It would not shock me at all to see the Vikings move back up into the 31st, 32nd pick and take a guy like Malik Willis or Desmond Ridder or one of these quarterbacks that people are predicting fall down into the early second. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see the Vikings make a trade, get back up there. We didn't see Spielman do it a lot. It'll be interesting. I don't know what the analytics say, but I'm sure our new GM does.
If only we had a quarterback on the roster that could potentially demand a first round pick in return,
Right.
and they could have 2 first round picks and kind of try to draft a position of need on that defense while pairing that
Yep.
with
Oh,
maybe a Matt
that'd be
Corral type
if
player.
we got a first for Cousins. I've done a dozen mock drafts and the season's not even over where I just trade away like 2 future firsts and I say, okay, that's Cousins, and then I get 2 in this year's draft. And every time I'm like, okay, it's almost the same pairing every time. I get N'Kobe Dean and I get whatever quarterback I want. Sometimes I wait and it's a later pick and I get Desmond Ritter, and sometimes I wait and it is what it is. But it'll be exciting. I'm excited to start doing some mock drafts here on the show, doing all that. Tom Day, this will be the final chat of the evening, says, can Cousins be better in Minnesota with a coach that actually works with him? I think Cousins could be better here. I think his ceiling is a slightly better Jimmy Garoppolo. So like, if there's a lightning run and the defense plays out of its mind and the offense and the run game really kicks it in and Dalvin stays healthy, we might be able to make a Super Bowl. But I don't think we're beating a Kansas City or a Buffalo. Maybe not even an LA with
Yeah,
Kirk
I
Cousins
see.
having to be our leader.
I think especially the NFC, we're starting to see the AFC just absolutely take over with young quarterbacks. You're seeing if Aaron Rodgers were to leave the NFC and Tom Brady were to retire, like there's not a lot of names. Even some of the young guys from last year's draft class, like Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence. There's some guys that haven't really proven much yet in the NFC with Justin Fields, Trey Lance still sitting behind Jimmy Garoppolo. I would definitely put Kirk Cousins in a tier ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo. I think I would put him more. And I've always said this. I feel like the two are fairly interchangeable. I think I can see the argument of either or being the better of the two. But I think you put him more in, and this is, I think this is a lot of respect to Kirk. I think you put him in more of a Matthew Stafford role, or not role, like category. I think they're very similar. If you put Kirk Cousins out in Los Angeles on that roster with the defense they have, some of the playmakers they have, I think they're sitting at the same exact spot that they're at currently. I mean, Matthew Stafford, he's made some absolutely like Detroit Lions-esque type boneheaded throws, and they're still doing some damage. Obviously, what he's done with Cooper Kupp, getting Odell Beckham Jr. kind of back in the swing of things, it's fun to see, and I think Kirk Cousins is capable of doing that. Could that be here? I don't know, because I don't think that defense is going to be good enough for Kirk Cousins. They always say, like, look at the points Kirk Cousins puts up. Yes, that's great. But on the other side of the ball, the defense ranks 29th, 30th, 31st, or 32nd, which I don't care who your quarterback is. It's going to be very, very difficult to overcome that.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to overcome that when you're sitting in the red numbers with the cap space.
This is my final thing, actually. Like, actually, this time, this will be my final thing, and then I'll throw it to you to, give us the skull as always and get us out of here. Tom Day brings up a really good point. I know I said last chat. I won't read the chat because I will be a man of my word. Brian O'Neill, named to his first Pro Bowl. Well-deserved. He's a stud.
Look at that offensive line appreciation post in the offseason.
Absolutely have to. Whenever your right tackle makes the Pro Bowl, he only made it because Tristan Wirfs is injured. Whatever, who cares? I think Teddy made it one year because a quarterback got injured, or like another quarterback was playing in the Super Bowl. Was it Teddy that made it because somebody got hurt? I can't remember.
I think, I can't remember.
I think it was Teddy, but I don't quote me on it. Yeah, that's pretty cool news. Brian O'Neill, I think he's a name that everyone's pretty confident he's going to stay in the purple and gold and hopefully be a part of a Super Bowl winning roster. But on that front, that's all I have. Really excited about the hire. This was my number one candidate, even though what do I know about GMs and all that? I'm just excited to hear who the coach is going to be because that's the guy who I can really get mad at and I can really sink my teeth into. So, Jack, I'll pass it over to you for your final thoughts and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I don't have much to talk about. Obviously, it's the off season. Just make sure you're tuning in upcoming weeks. I mean, next week is February already, which means the NFL Combine is right around the corner, which is absolutely crazy. And I'm sure once we get to that point, Jordan and myself will probably both. I guess I shouldn't say a number because I don't want to embarrass myself on a live recording of a podcast about the amount of mock drafts I've already done when we're not even through the Super Bowl yet. So I won't say that number, but look out ahead or keep an eye out down the road. I'm sure Jordan and myself, we will be doing mock draft after mock draft, and we'll probably be doing a couple live mocks as well, which we did last year, going to the draftnetwork.com, see what we can do with trades, see who we like. There'll be a lot more of us watching some film too and kind of figuring out some of these guys that we're going to be screaming for come April, when there's probably a very, very good chance that the Vikings won't even come close to drafting any of the players that we love. But what's the fun in not doing that? That's the only question I'm going to ask. But at the end of the day, the Vikings have their GM. The head coach hire will probably likely follow within the next week. It's going to be an extremely fun week on Twitter. I've been addicted to Twitter all week already. I haven't been able to
So
get
am
off of
I.
it. So I'm sure that will continue. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, super excited to see how he attacks the draft process and what the Vikings do this year in the draft cycle. But it's going to be fun. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at LTB Vikings. And most importantly, Skol as always.